I'm looking forward to you announcing your top 10 rated players again tonight. You're doing it every 4 weeks, and plenty of feedback for you after the first round. So looking forward to the second round of top 10 players. Why don't we begin, though, with your overall observations from the round?
Yeah, so the overall observations are regarding those top 10 players that we've got after round 8, and after round 8, and I'm glad you're excited, G, about this, because I know the Twitter feed is going to go absolutely bananas, and we're going to cop an absolute caning coming back our way. But I think anytime you do anything list wise, it does create a bit of controversy. But I think one thing that we have been working on internally this year, and Kane, you alluded to it early on, in the year, that it is getting harder and harder to actually rate players against their own position, given that it's quite rare now that we see players spend 100% game time in one position. So it can be a little bit misleading at times to rate Nick Dacos against all halfback flankers because he's spending 30% game time as a midfielder.
So how are you going to do that? You're doing it per 100 minutes.
So we're basically looking at it per 100 minutes, and we're taking into account exactly where you've played all over the ground in that per 100 minutes, and what's your expectation, from an AFL player rating points that you're meant to be, exceeding or averaging per 100 minutes, if you like. So if you're a player that's played 80 minutes as a midfielder and 10 minutes as a defender and 10 minutes as a forward, you might be averaging or expected to average 10 rating points. Mm-hmm. If you average 15 in that time, you're +5 on your expectation. So that's basically what we're trying to do. And I think it's going to be a far greater measure moving forward. In saying that, I'm prepared that this is going to get a little bit of traction, a little bit of heat coming back our way.
At the start, do you think? Or
a little bit, a little bit. But the more that we sort of play with it, the more that I'm sort of becoming happier and happier with it. And like everything, Kane, not everyone's going to agree with everything, and that's fine. Our stuff comes at it from a totally different lens to what everything else does.
Well, before you move on, we've got a Carlton supporter here, and a lot of Carlton supporters are a little bit concerned right now. But they want to know if there's any way of assessing talent, because according to Anthony, they have multiple first-round misses in their draft years. I think Carlton have only a mid-table talent base across their list. Is there any way that you can assess it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you can assess it, and there's multiple ways to assess it. I mean, when you're assessing use, you got to assess it in a different way. When you're assessing established players, we can compare basically everyone to everyone in the competition. So we can look at the talent that Carlton have behind the ball, ahead of the ball, and in the middle of the ground. So I don't think anyone's sort of really questioning Carlton's talent in each third of the ground. It's sort of more the method that they're actually implementing at the moment that's probably got people questioning them.
What sticks out in the method?
The ball movement method is the one for me. So I think we saw the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year they implemented more of a controlled low boundary sort of method behind centre to protect the back half of the ground, and that actually worked defensively, but offensively that struggled. Over the last couple of weeks, we've sort of seen them shift a little bit in that way. They've become a little bit quicker. They're trying to attack the corridor a little bit more, but it does look a little bit disjointed at the moment. I think that can actually take a little bit of time when you actually shift offensively in terms of what you're actually doing. But it does look a little bit disjointed at the moment.
But what about round clearances? Because last year, particularly early before, in particular, Hewitt got injured, they were taking the ball out the front of the stoppage, etc., and they didn't look, and then no one was actually claiming how slow they were.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the first 4 weeks of the year, their clearance game in terms of scoring from clearance, really dropped away from second to about mid-table, if you like. But if you have a look over the last 3 or 4 weeks, their scoring from stoppage has actually got back to number 2 in the competition over that time. It's been what they've been able to do in the turnover game, and that gets back to the ball movement side of things. They haven't really been able to punish the opposition going back the other way. So it's just that's where the confusion comes into it. They struggled to score from stoppage in the first couple of weeks, but they're going okay from turnover. The last 4 weeks, that's flipped again. So just trying to get that balance right is what they're actually struggling to do at the moment.
I can't wait any longer. Are we ready to reveal the top 10 rated players starting at number 10?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's roll. So number 10, we've got Christian Petracca. So Christian Petracca is meant to be averaging 11 AFL player rating points per game on the position that he's actually spending. He's averaging 15.5 per game, so he's going exceptional. So any time you're above 3 or 4 rating points above expectation is a considerably good performance.
I reckon for his position, on average last year, All-Australian selection was 15.
Yeah, no, it was. He was, and he's game of the weekend, and I'll get to that later on, was actually quite good as well. Number 9, this is going to be the first surprise. So number 9 is still Sidebottom. So we've mentioned him a little bit on this show so far this year. So the role that he's playing mainly as that wingman, you're meant to be averaging 8 AFL player rating points per game. He's averaging close to 13 per game. So
is there a chance for a breakthrough on a wingman in the All-Australian side, Kane?
We had Blixarves on the bench, didn't we?
No, he was on the wing from memory. No,
he was on the bench last year.
Yeah, we had the captain of
we had Mills and Miller, didn't we?
No, it was Miller. That's right.
Yeah, Miller was on there. Yeah. So number 8 is Tim English. So so Tim English meant to be averaging close to 12 AFL player rating points per game, playing mainly as a ruckman, averaging just over 16 per game there as well. So he's going quite nicely. Number 7 is going to be a surprise, and it's another wingman. So it's Mason Wood. So Mason Wood, for the role that he's meant to be playing, meant to be averaging 7.9 AFL player rating points per game. He's averaging 12.5 rating points per game. So that transition for him to go from sort of being a little bit in no man's land to now really occupying a permanent wing role and being able to impact the game both defensively and offensively has been significant.
Is anybody close to being as good as him, as most improved in this season?
I think you'll struggle to find someone.
Yeah.
I mean, to go from, obviously Kane's part of the selection panel, so it's a bit hard for him to comment on. But if you're picking a genuine wingman, he's got to be absolutely right in conversation to fulfil that role in the All-Australian team. Next in line is another probably surprise to many, and I'm probably going to cop a lot for this, is Jeremy Cameron. So Jeremy Cameron, like Mason Wood, meant to be averaging 7.9 AFL player rating points per game for the role that he's playing, and he's averaging, just like Mason Wood, 12.6 AFL player rating points per 100 minutes. So
why isn't he higher? Is he inaccurate or?
Yep. So the number one reason why he isn't rated number 2 in the competition is he's had 3 games where he's been inaccurate in front of goal. So for people that aren't familiar with the rating system, inaccuracy in front of goal costs you significantly in this, and we'll get into the accuracy component from a few teams later on in the show, but it does cost you games. Whether or not you agree with it or not is up for conversation, but just understanding that if you have a bad day in front of goal, it's significantly going to cost you. So that the round 3 game against Gold Coast where he kicked 3 goals, 3, and I think he kicked 1 or 2 out in the full, really did hurt him that day. And I think he had another game, and then on the weekend as well, did have a couple of missed shots in front of goal as well. So that's the only reason as to why he's not the second highest rated player in the competition.
So it's a fundamental difference between the rankings and the ratings, where the rankings, and people would see these on Fox Footy, where people get 140 and 150. They don't penalise you for inaccuracy, whereas the ratings absolutely penalise you.
Yeah, so you get penalised significantly. So that's the only reason why he's not the second highest.
So when you talk who the coaches missed, you're going off basically the super coach points, isn't it? Like the champion data game points, not the ratings.
No, going off the ratings.
Ratings.
Yeah,
okay.
So everything's off the ratings. So basically from a super coach, from a rankings perspective, from a ranking points perspective, that's mainly just the super coach sort of thing that everyone sort of plays from a fantasy footy perspective. When we're analysing performance and the impact that you're having on matches, it's purely just off the AFL player ratings.
Who's number 4?
So number 5, is Charlie Cameron. So Charlie Cameron's just ahead of Jeremy Cameron there, so 7.9 like Jeremy, but averaging 13 per game. Nick Dacos comes in at number 4, so he's meant to be averaging 9.3. He's averaging 14.3, so he's flying. Number 3 is a guy that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, and again, I know I'm going to cop criticism for this. It's Mitch Owens.
Okay.
So Mitch Owens is flying at the moment and really going under the radar. 8.3 he's meant to be averaging, and he's actually averaging 13.5 per
So
game.
he's the most improved player in the comp then, by a mile.
Well, don't know if he's the most improved, given that he only played 2 or 3 games last year. So just what's the quantity, if you like, beforehand to actually be considered most improved. But he's, in terms of what he's doing this year, he's just, we're talking him and Nick Dacos in terms of performance for young kids have just been exceptional. Charlie Curnow, number 2. in the competition. So unlike Jeremy Cameron, where Jeremy's had a couple of poor days, Charlie's accuracy in front of goal this year has been through the roof for the whole 8 matches. So that's the difference between the two. And number 1, so between number 2 and number 10, there is bugger all in it.
Yep.
The gap between number 1 is just miles apart, and that's Bontempelli. Yeah. There's no one that's even close to him. And we've gone back and done this since 2010. And at round 8, it's the second best season we've seen by a midfielder. The only better season that we've seen by a midfielder was Gary Ablett in 2010. And any time I've mentioned Gary Ablett in a sentence is you're performing to a ridiculous standard.
Marcus Bontempelli, the best rated player by Champion Data in the game. Curnow, Owens, Dacos, Charlie Cameron, Jeremy Cameron, Wood, English, Still, Sidebottom and Christian Petrarca round out the top 10. If you want to have your say on any of that, you can 0433 98 11 16 and hit up Hoyney's Twitter account if you're not happy.
It's gonna go bananas.
Can I ask you, Hoyney, are you better off not having a shot at goal than having a shot and missing?
Good question.
As far as the ratings are concerned.
Well, it depends on where the shot at goal's from. If the shot at goal's from 25 metres out directly in front of goal and you miss it, well, then you're going to get penalised significantly.
Yep.
If you're having a shot at goal under pressure 45 metres out in the boundary and you miss, well, you're not going to get penalised for that. So, but I mean, like, how often do we talk about in the industry that accuracy costs matches, and then we talk about it from a player, from a player side of things that we are going to penalise that action, and then so you can't really sort of have it both ways. We feel anyway.
Do you feel as if people take that into consideration when media people are giving their votes? Because I often see 35 and 1 goal for, and yet the 35 almost trumps the 1 goal for.
Yeah, I don't think it gets. I think it gets taken into account quite often at a team level. I don't think it gets taken into account enough at a player level.
All right, let's move on to your 7 main talking points from the weekend, because Chris Fagan said Josh Dunkley's game was as good as he's seen. How did you see it? Pretty good?
Yeah, so again, the Twitter feedback's gone bananas since Friday night for the way that his game got rated. So I just wanted to explain why he was rated where he was. And for those that are unaware, his AFL player ratings were 5.4, which rated him as, I think, a bottom 15 player
I missed that.
on the ground. So the main reason why is if you take into account what the impact that he had on the match from a ball-winning perspective and his defensive actions, it was a top 5 rated game across the course of the season. So that aspect in terms of his contest, clearance and pressure work, sensational. Where it hurt him was his ball use. And you go back and you've got to go back and actually watch his disposals. His ball use, he actually was in the negative 8.6 AFL player rating points from his ball use, which was the 3rd worst of any player in any game this year. So that's the reason why he rated where he did. I keep coming back to it that quite often we just simply go to the stat sheet, we see 34 disposals, 13 tackles, we just assume that it was an unbelievable game. It was a fantastic game in 2/3 of the role that he had to do, and one part that we actually can't take into consideration is what he did in terms of shutting down Paddy Cripps, which the ratings can't take into account that. So put your hand up there. But in terms of what he did from a ball use perspective, there's room for improvement.
I just want a question to put on the agenda later in terms of the matchups and how Champion Data sees the matchups and how accurate it can be when often no one plays on anyone. We'll get back to that shortly. Tom Hawkins, what did you see in his game?
I think if the season keeps going like this, I don't know how often this has happened, but we'll have the same 3 key forwards in the All-Australian team for 2 years in a row. I mean, a lot was made of Tom's start to the year, and it was a bit sluggish, if you like. But what he's done there, since probably round 3, round 4, he's the 12th highest rated player on our system in the competition at the moment. And you go back to just what he's done for so long, and take into consideration the slow start. He's AFL number 6 for score involvements this year. He's again AFL number 5 for score assists, and he's already taken 36 marks inside 50 this year, despite the slow start, which is the second most by any player that we've seen after round 8 in 14 years. Ironically, the most that we've seen was Tom again at this stage last year as well. So he's absolutely flying at the moment. And you look at our key forward ratings, if you like, and it's clearly Cameron, Curnow, and Hawkins that are streets clear of the next highest rated key forwards in the competition. So it's amazing. It's amazing what he's done. And I mean, even his game on the weekend. So Jordan Bartz, I thought Jordan Bartz actually played him quite well. I thought Jordan Bartz actually did as well as you possibly could against him. And you might look at the stat sheet and go, geez, he only kicked one goal. Why is he rated so high? He was again involved in 10 scores. He again had 4 score assists. Geelong are under pressure to start that game. Adelaide had the first 8 or 9 inside 50s. He gets that first score assist to Tom Atkins through a beautiful little kick. Tom Atkins takes the mark, settles Geelong down, kicks the goal away. They rock and roll. So he's just so impressive.
Yep, I don't think anyone will argue with that. Another key forward is on your radar, or is he a key forward? Not sure where he plays, Jeremy Finlayson.
Yeah, I think this conversation needs to sort of, probably move to another level. I think he needs to become Port's number 1 ruck. I think the body of evidence over the last 18 months now. So if you look back to round 13 onwards last year, he was our highest rated ruckman in the competition, spending about 75% game time in the ruck. Port Adelaide in that period were the number 1 scoring team from clearance. Their clearance game is their strength. That's what they really were sort of thriving on last year in the second half of the season. And then you go to that game on Sunday. And at quarter time, you did this game, G. At quarter time, the difference in the game was the centre bounce work.
Yeah, it was 8-1.
8-1, 3 goals from it. Yep. It was an absolute domination. And Teakle was mainly in there for that first quarter. After quarter time, Finlayson goes in there, becomes their number 1 ruck for the last 3 quarters. They break even in clearance. They break even in scores from clearance. But more importantly, as a result, they're able to get the ball going their way. He's able to follow up. He's able to be a ground ball player.
Got a few clearances himself.
Yeah, and I know, and I heard Kingy mention this on Sunday night as well. He is their mark blitzer, and I think Kingy's 100% spot on in that. But I mean, you have a look at what he's done when he's in the centre bounce this year. Port Adelaide have won 19 clearances and lost 13. It's the best differential of any Port Adelaide player this year. Unfortunately for Teakle, when Teakle's in there, they've only won 19 centre clearances and they've lost 35. So it's a significant difference between the output that you're getting from one ruck to the other.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to change the way we look at ruckman, Kane? And are we going to go for guys better on the ground as much as we go for guys better in the air and the hit out to advantage?
Just don't know with Finlayson, because he's going in there often fresh and he's not forced to do that for 4 quarters. Yep. You do get the real burst and you get that real explosiveness at ground level and the follow-up he gives you. If he was their number 1 ruckman and required to do 80% of the ruck work, would you lose that because of fatigue? And I'm not sure whether he fully wants to be in there playing that role. So it's a really interesting conundrum, because I'm with you. Every time I watch Potley getting smashed from centre bounce, I'm going to put Finlayson in there.
Yeah.
But
well, let's call it he's the prototype
time.
Along with Blitzarves for the number 2 ruckman.
It's a great point Kane makes, because I mean, like I don't know his fitness levels. I don't know his endurance. I'm not too sure. All we're going off is just the data and what the data's telling us. So it is an interesting conversation.
Scott Lycett's hurt them, because you'd love for him to be the second one and Lycett to stand up, but his form is going that poorly that he's been overlooked by Teakle. So I mean, they've got a few issues, Port Adelaide, and it's I've done a pretty good job to be where they are at, but issues that I don't think are going to be solved easily. And we are moving through Hoyney's 7 main talking points from the weekend.
Any
Tom
update from the Tribunal?
Other than Brad Close failed with his, and Van Rooyen is still giving evidence, I believe. If that changes, we'll give you an update.
Come through.
As it happens.
I think you two will be off air by the time that's come through.
Hoyney Libba, what are you noticing?
Yeah, so obviously, I celebrated a lot, with the work that Bont has done this year, and rightly so. But I just want to give some love to Libba. So, getting back to those ratings, if we actually expanded that out to at least 600 minutes game time played, whereas the first lot we just did a minimum 800 minutes game time played. If we expanded out to 600 minutes, he'd be the 3rd highest rated player in the competition. But obviously, he got concussed in one game and missed another, so he doesn't actually qualify. But what I wanted to give a bit of love to Libba is what he's actually doing from a ball use perspective. So we all laud what he's done from a clearance and contest perspective for a number of years, but he's taken his game to a whole nother level in terms of what he's doing from a ball use perspective. So out of all the midfielders in the competition, he's having the 7th most impact of any player from a ball use perspective. And what I like about his game over the last month in particular, or the last 4 games he's played, he's kicked 4 goals. in that time as well. So we haven't really associated him as being a goal-kicking midfielder as well. And there's been no surprise that sort of his form has been through the roof over the last 5 weeks. And the Dogs have got their clearance game back. So they're the third best team for raw clearance differential over the last 5 weeks. So I just wanted to give him a bit of love.
So whilst you're running hot with the Bulldogs, we've got a text coming through. We might as well deal with it now. Jack McRae and his impact this year compared to the last few years. This particular person says doesn't find him as damaging and as impactful. Maybe the stats say otherwise. Haven't they moved him inside when he started outside?
No, so they're sort of playing him as that high half forward role, almost like a 50-50 split between forward and mid this year. And he's actually starting to have some greater impact now over the last couple of weeks than what he was actually doing in the first couple of weeks of the season.
You wanted to continue the discussion on the Blues?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about a midfielder and Adam Cerra. So there's a lot of talk this week clearly about Carlton and a lot of talk about the impact that their mids are actually having from the amount of disposals that they actually rack up. Well, there is one midfielder at the moment that is having significant impact from the disposals that he's having, and that's Adam Cerra. So over the last 4 weeks, he's the fourth highest rated player in the competition, which actually might surprise people.
Yeah.
And again, I get back to the ball use perspective, which is the issue at the moment when you look at the Blues. And over the last 4 weeks, these are the players that are having the highest impact from a ball use perspective. It's Tom Hawkins, number 1, Jeremy Cameron, number 2, and then Adam Cerra, number 3. And if you compare the impact that he's having from a ball use perspective to the next midfielder at Carlton, it's double any other Carlton midfielder at the moment. So if you're a Carlton supporter, you want to get the ball in his hands. So I talked about at the start of the show in terms of what Carlton have actually been able to do over the last 5 weeks and been able to get back at scoring from clearance, and their contest work has actually been strong, and their ball movement looks like it's actually been a little bit more aggressive. He's actually been a significant reason as to why that aspect of the game has turned.
I was definitely a critic of his since he has come to the club because I didn't think he had that impact. I didn't think he was doing the damage with his possessions, but you've clearly noticed the shift. He's getting more of it too. Like he was a low 20s sort of midfielder who largely went unnoticed at times, but you're right. Big impact in the last month. He's been one of the more improved players in the competition, which is terrific and exactly what they needed to take the pressure off Cripps and Walsh. Jack Buckley.
I feel like we probably should have done a most improved segment here because Jack Buckley, I mean, he hasn't played the last 18 months, but what he's been able to do this year, and I had to look at his numbers last week, and it took me a little bit by surprise, to be honest. I had to sit back and watch him against Aaron Norton on Saturday night, and I thought that battle between him and Norton was fantastic to watch in pretty challenging conditions. But what he's done this year is been phenomenal for a key defender. He's had the 7th hardest matchups in the competition. He's been involved in 49 one-on-one contests. So to put that in perspective, the next most contests for a one-on-one player in the competition this year is 36. So he's been involved in 13 more one-on-one contests than any other player in the competition. In terms of his ability to be able to win a one-on-one contest, it's elite. In terms of his ability to lose it, it's also elite. And what he's been able to do in terms of a ball winning and a ball use perspective this year, he ticks all the boxes. So if we're looking at GWS, and I know that they're a little bit off Broadway, if you like, and there's a little bit of time needed to probably assess GWS, but for the next 10 years, you can lock away a gun key defender, and I talked about Sam Taylor a couple of weeks ago, and now this guy at centre half back has come from nowhere, and I don't think they even probably expected him to do.
No wonder Himmelberg can't get a Guernsey down there.
Yeah, and I was just speaking to Josh on his way out, and and I think he was saying that he was left out of the team round 1, but then came in as a late inclusion, and he's just gone from absolute strength to strength. So I just wanted to give shout out to him. Big game for him coming up this week, probably against Brodie Moracek off the back of 5 goals on Sunday.
What was the last of your 7 main talking points from the round?
Yeah, just having a look at the Collingwood Sydney game. So I mentioned on this show last week that I was still putting Collingwood a little bit on watch in terms of I don't think that they're playing anywhere near their best footy at the moment, which is probably scary for the rest of the competition given that they are 7-1. But I always, me and King have sort of been big on this. Always get worried about teams that try and play the high-marking, high-controlled game of footy over the teams that just are happy to embrace the imperfection and just get it forward and gain the territory however you can. And I was sort of watching that game on Sunday as as tight as it was for 3 quarters, it just felt that Sydney were always on knife edge playing that that high marking game. It doesn't take much for things to come unstuck. So
Has anyone won a premiership playing the control?
Well, you look at West Coast are the outlier in terms of that. So Geelong tried to do it for a number of years, and it got them success to a degree, but didn't get them the ultimate. Fremantle last year and Fremantle to start this year were implementing that way. But 132 marks for 44 entries. Whilst it did look dangerous at times, compared to the 72 marks from close to 60 entries that Collingwood were able to get. And if I could just go further into that, if you like. So we have a look at the top 6 teams from an uncontested marking perspective this year. So St Kilda have taken the most in the competition, so that's an interesting watch just there. Carlton have taken the second most. We just talked about them at the start of the show. Hawthorn, Gold Coast, Essendon, North. So you don't see Collingwood up there. You don't see Brisbane up there, you don't see Geelong up there, and you don't see Melbourne up there. Probably the 4 best teams in the competition right now. So it is just a watch for me when you have to, if you're going to rely on that method, how sustainable is that across the course of a season? It might get you a win here or there, but is it actually going to deliver you the ultimate? I'm not convinced on that.
Good stuff, Hoyney, working through his 7 main talking points from the round. Let's line up the coaches. We do this each and every week. We do it in a fun way, but just interesting to note, referencing their coaches' votes versus what you saw at Champion Data. Who did they miss first?
Well, just overall observations in that. I noticed that 8 of the 9 best on-ground players from the coaches this week got 10 votes.
Indeed.
So the coaches are on the same page this week. So if we start with Jared Berry. So Jared Berry didn't get a vote from the coaches, but we had him as the 4th highest rated player on the ground. So 29 disposals, which is the second most of his career, actually. But again, not just the disposals, it was the impact that he had ball in hand. So playing more of an outside game. He only had the 6 contested possessions, but his ball use on Friday night was superb.
They went Dunkley, Payne, Cameron, Cerra, Andrews, Zach Bailey, and Hugh McCluggage. So he should have slid in for at least a vote.
Yeah, didn't get a vote. So that's okay. We'll keep an eye on him moving forward.
Petrarca, they missed him, did they?
Yeah, so Petrarca's game was an interesting one because it was a fascinating battle watching him and Real, especially in that first 40 minutes, 45 minutes of the game, wasn't it? It was fantastic. But so he didn't get a vote, but we had him as the 4th highest rated player on the ground, and again it was a powerful performance, and that's why the ratings sort of rewarded him so highly. High metres gained, contest game was strong, 8 clearances, again a lot of territory,
Big
8
goal when
inside
it
50s.
counted.
Good goal and 4 score assists as well. So a lot of the stuff that he did went a little bit unnoticed.
Anderson got the 10, Oliver, Rowell, Gawn 3, Powell 3, Swallow 2, Charlie Ballard 1.
Yeah, geez, Kane, I feel for you come All-Australian time working out the All-Australian mids. No, Anderson's last couple of weeks has just been phenomenal.
Midfield's always, isn't it? And Gerard will reflect on this because there's so many midfielders to squeeze them into 6 spots maybe. Like that's why often the midfielders get pushed out to the wings because there's so many good midfielders.
There's too many good
out.
wings this year, Kane. The rule has got to be changed.
You can fight the good fight.
I reckon the most challenging positions that you're going to have so far are the mids and then behind the ball. I reckon ahead of the ball. I reckon if you were to finish the season right now, I reckon the head of the ball is pretty straightforward in terms of who's going to get selected there. But the mids and behind the ball are the interesting ones.
Made an attempt to get it as a list of 23 last year, but it got poo-pooed because they would have had to change the rule and get the lawyers involved. But I tell you what, if they change it mid-season this year, Kane, you're going to have an opportunity. 23.
It'll help. You've already mentioned this guy.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk. So Jack Buckley's game, as I said before, in terms of what he did against Aaron Norton. So that was the 8th best game that was seen by any key defender this year, and the highest rated game of his year. So to put it into context, what he did against one of the more powerful key forwards in the competition: 12 spoils and 9 intercept possessions. So combined, he diffused the situation 21 times behind the ball on the weekend, which is an elite performance in terms of what he did. 4th highest rated player on the ground, but missed out on getting a coach's vote.
And what about in the game between Collingwood and Sydney? Who'd they miss?
Yeah, we've had Jordan De Goey in here a couple of times this year in terms of who did they miss, and sort of So he didn't get a vote on the weekend from the coaches, but we had him as the 2nd highest rated player on the ground and Collingwood's highest rated player as well. So It's more how often he actually wins the ball and then it turns into scores.
Yep.
So again on the weekend, I think he only had 21, 22 disposals, but 9 or 10 of them resulted in scores. So if you're a midfielder, any time you around about 30% of your disposals turn into scores, that's at a ridiculous rate. He's sometimes going around about that 45, 50% of his disposals turning into scores. So it's that impact that he's having on matches is significant. And again, I talked about him last week. Again, in a tight game, big game, his performance was superb.
And lastly, a veteran turned back the clock, did he?
Yeah, probably the only real part of this game that really interested me was the battle between Goldstein and Marshall. I thought it was a fantastic battle. So we had Goldstein as the highest rated player on the ground, but he didn't get a vote. That was his best performance of the year, and I think yeah. But then we had Marshall as the third highest rated player on the ground. He also didn't get a vote as well. So I thought. For the part of the game that was most fascinating to me, and then to see the coaches' votes this morning, it was a bit interesting.
You're giving Ross a cook after he looked after you.
No, I would never give Ross a cook after that.
Hoyney, your gem and your horror.
Yeah, so we'll start with the gem, and we talked about how important accuracy is in terms of measuring the AFL player ratings. Well, we look at it from a team perspective this year. So after 8 rounds, the D's, through good accuracy themselves, have kicked 115 more points than what they should based on the shots at goal that they've had, and that's the second most that we've seen by any team over the last 15 years after round 8. So hats off to them, well done. On the other side, interesting watch with St Kilda. So their oppositions should have kicked 110 points more than what they actually have based on the shots that they have.
Good manning of the mark by St Kilda.
Yeah, so a little bit of luck on the Saints side there, and that's the most, and clearly the most.
Is that a watch for you?
That's a watch, because the D's is hats off to them for their own accuracy, but opposition inaccuracy, I think that's just down to a bit of pure luck. So they're conceding 59 points a game, St Kilda, but if their opposition had a kick to expectation, it'd be 73, which is still the best defence in the competition, but just a little bit on watch. Yeah.
They got a man on the mark, coach, who's really flat after that, and you're giving him no credit at all.
He's a genius, Ross.
What about your horror?
And the horror is just Clarko. So and North's game on the weekend. So 34 points. That's the second fewest that Alistair Clarkson has actually generated for an Alistair Clarkson coach team. So the fewest was 31 points back in 2007. 34 points for East St Kilda. Haven't seen that under a Clarkson team in 16 years.
Under a roof as well. Not sure what the conditions were like back in 2007, but probably not as good as under a roof. All right, some questions we got to get through. Isaac Quainer had his best game of the year on the weekend. Does Hoyney have his one-on-one stats? Because I know a few weeks ago he still hadn't lost a one-on-one contest.
Yeah, this person needs to come into the studio to provide a gem. So only been involved in 7 one-on-one contests, Isaac Quainer, but has lost 0. Won 5 of them as well. So exceptional return.
Another question here from another Isaac, comparing Isaac's All-Australian year last year with this year.
Heaney.
Heaney.
Yeah, so Heaney's year this year, so accuracy has dropped by half, which has played a considerable role. But his one-on-one stuff, he was one of the best, along with Tom Hawkins last year, one of the best one-on-one players in the competition, won 45% of his one-on-ones. This year, he's won 12%. So that's a staggering drop in just one area of the game for Isaac.
All right, Hoyney, who would you rank as the top 4 teams? There's a consensus view that I think the top 4 have separated themselves. Does Champion Data see it that way?
Yeah, I'd have it that way. I'd still have Collingwood and Melbourne just ahead of Brisbane, and then I'd have Brisbane ahead of Geelong. Still, I know you're massive on Geelong, Kane, and fair enough.
Everyone's
too.
playing for second.
There's still just areas defensively for Geelong that I think that they need to tidy up, and we're only at round 8, so there's plenty of time to do that. But right now, I think like everyone, there is a 4, and probably for me there is a 2 at the moment.
There you go. Any love for the biggest contested ball beast in the league? Asks Scotty.
Yeah, so he's flying as well, Oliver. I think we got him, on the new rating system that we're trying to implement here. We got him as a top 20 player in the competition. I mean, he's contested ball and ground ball work in the competition. He's number 1, and what he's been able to do this year in terms of a scoreboard perspective as well, has really improved and been able to elevate his game. It's been interesting just to watch him sort of evolve his game over a number of years. He was never a high meters game play. Well, He was never a kicker. That's sort of changed over the last couple of years. He was never a high scoreboard player. That's starting to change now. So absolute star, Clayton.
Caller here or a texter wanting to know if you take tags into consideration.
Yeah, we do. And you mentioned this at the start of the show, Kane, with the matchups and sort of, to our guys' defence, it is so hard to actually get midfield matchups absolutely correct. And that's why sort of, when people do ask about them, I just treat it as a bit of a guide as opposed to an absolute hard and fast. Who tagged who was matched up against who. I think the key position, in terms of the key forwards and key backs, I think you've got.
But
more
you don't give
confidence in
Oliver
them.
a bonus because he's been tagged.
No, we don't. But we have a look at the tagger. So if we have a look at Andrew Swallow. David Swallow, for instance, if he went up against Clayton Oliver and Clayton Oliver was expected to average 15 AFL player rating points for that game, but he only got 10 as a result of what David Swallow did, we recognise David Swallow in a different rating system, not in the actual overall player rating system.
There's a question on Melbourne last quarters. They haven't lost one this year. Do you know the record? Like it would be maybe one for Swamp or the stats gurus out there, but they're going pretty well in their last quarters as well as their goal kicking, the Ds.
No, they are. It's so they're plus 142 points on the scoreboard in fourth quarters. They haven't lost one yet this year. And if you have a look at last quarters, it's probably no surprise, but Collingwood are plus 122 points on the scoreboard in last quarters, but those two are miles clear of any other team in the competition. The next best team is about plus 60.
Hoyney, outstanding edition as always. If you've missed any of that, you can catch up on the podcast doing unbelievable numbers. Thanks for your work again tonight and stopping by the studio.
No worries, guys. Have a good week.